During a hike with our entire family, my daughter accidentally fell and lost a lot of blood, so we had to rush her to the hospital. The doctor told us that my daughter needed a blood transfusion or she might not survive. When we found out that my sister's daughter was a suitable donor, we pleaded with her to help. Then my sister shouted, "No, you stay away from my daughter, I'm not letting her give blood, she might get infected." While my parents were comforting my sister and told her to leave at once. While I pleaded, "Please save my daughter's life." My mother snorted, "Don't worry, once she's gone it will be over." I called my husband and he rushed with another donor, but by then it was too late. When I told him what happened, he left everyone's lives in ruins. I need to get it out. Some of you might think what my husband did went too far, but after you hear what my family put me through, you might understand why he did what he did. It started 2 months ago during what was supposed to be a beautiful family hiking trip in the mountains. My husband Darren couldn't make it because of work, so it was just me, my 8-year-old daughter Faith, my parents, my sister Cheryl, and her 10-year-old daughter Mia. We'd been planning this trip for weeks, and despite some family tensions that had been building over the years, I thought it would be good for everyone to spend time together. The hike started perfectly. Faith and Mia were running ahead, laughing and collecting interesting rocks, while Cheryl and I walked behind them with our parents. The trail was well marked and not particularly challenging, which made it perfect for the kids. We'd been hiking for about 2 hours when we reached a scenic overlook where we decided to stop for lunch. That's when everything went wrong. Faith had climbed onto a rock formation to get a better view, something she'd done countless times before on other hikes with Darren and me. But this time, the rock she grabbed onto was loose. I watched in horror as she fell backward, her head striking a jagged outcrop on the way down. The sound it made will haunt me forever. She hit the ground hard and didn't move. When I reached her, there was so much blood. It was everywhere, pooling under her head, soaking into her hair, staining the ground around her. She was conscious but dazed, and I could see the gash on the back of her head was deep and bleeding profusely. "Call 911. I screamed to Cheryl while I pressed my jacket against Faith's head wound, trying to stop the bleeding. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep pressure on it. The paramedics arrived within 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. They stabilized Faith as best they could and got her into the ambulance. During the ride to Regional Medical Center, she kept drifting in and out of consciousness, and I could see the concern in the paramedic's eyes as he monitored her vital signs. At the hospital, Faith was rushed into the emergency room while I sat in the waiting area with my family, my clothes still covered in her blood. A doctor came out after what felt like an eternity. "Mrs. Williams?" Dr. Fletcher looked grave. "Your daughter has suffered severe head trauma and has lost a significant amount of blood. We need to perform surgery to repair the damage, but first, she needs an immediate blood transfusion. Her blood type is AB negative, which is quite rare. We're checking our blood bank now, but I need to be honest with you, we may not have enough on hand." My heart stopped. What does that mean? It means we need to find a compatible donor, and we need to find one quickly. Family members are often the best candidates. Do any of you know your blood types? I knew mine was A positive, which wouldn't work for AB negative. Cheryl stepped forward. "I'm B positive, and Mia is AB negative, just like Faith." I remember because the pediatrician made a big deal about how rare it was during her last checkup. Dr. Fletcher's eyes lit up. "That's perfect. If Mia is willing and you consent, she could donate. At her age and size, we'd only need a small amount, and it would be completely safe for her." I turned to Cheryl, my eyes filling with tears. "Cheryl, please. Faith needs this. Mia could save her life." But instead of the immediate yes I expected, Cheryl's face went pale. I need to think about this." "Think about what?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "This is Faith we're talking about. Your niece. She could die without this transfusion." "I know, but..." Cheryl looked around at our parents, who had been unusually quiet. "What if something goes wrong? What if Mia gets infected or has a reaction? I can't risk my daughter's health." Dr. Fletcher stepped in gently. "Ma'am, I understand your concerns, but blood donation is extremely safe, especially in a controlled hospital environment. The risk to your daughter would be minimal, far less than many everyday activities. Your niece, however, is in critical condition." But Cheryl was shaking her head vigorously. "No. You stay away from my daughter. I'm not letting her give blood, she might get infected. I won't risk it." I stared at her in disbelief. "Cheryl, this is Faith. This is my baby. Please, I'm begging you." That's when my parents, who I thought would support me, shocked me to my core. My mother put her arm around Cheryl. Honey, you're absolutely right to protect Mia. Cheryl, you should probably take her home. This is too traumatic for her to witness. What are you saying? I could barely form the words. Are you seriously telling her to leave with the only person who can save Faith? My father nodded grimly. Sometimes these things happen for a reason, Bonnie. We can't put one grandchild at risk for another. I felt like I was in a nightmare. Please save my daughter's life. I begged Cheryl one more time. I'll do anything. I'll pay for any tests you want, any follow-up care for Mia. Just please don't let my daughter die. My mother snorted, actually snorted, and said words that will be burned into my memory forever. Don't worry. Once she's gone, it will be over. I couldn't breathe. My own mother had just essentially said she was okay with my daughter dying. Cheryl was already walking toward the exit with Mia, my parents following behind them. With shaking hands, I called Darren. You need to get here now, I sobbed into the phone. Faith's dying and they won't help her. What do you mean they won't help her? Darren's voice was tight with panic. Through tears, I explained everything. The accident, the need for blood, Cheryl's refusal, my parents' support of her decision, their cruel words. I'm on my way, Darren said grimly. I'm bringing Marcus. Marcus was Darren's brother, and by some miracle, he also had AB-negative blood. But the hospital was an hour and a half away from our home, and I wasn't sure Faith had that much time. I sat alone in that waiting room, listening to the sounds of the hospital around me, knowing my daughter was fighting for her life while my family had abandoned us both. Nurses kept coming to check on me, asking if the donor was coming, and each time I had to tell them we were still waiting. The waiting room was sterile and cold, filled with the antiseptic smell that all hospitals have. I watched other families come and go, some crying, some laughing with relief, all of them with someone by their side. I had never felt so alone in my life. Every few minutes, I would look toward the doors, hoping to see Cheryl returning with Mia, hoping she had come to her senses. But the doors only opened for strangers. About 30 minutes after they left, Dr. Fletcher came back to check on me. His expression was grave as he sat down beside me. Mrs. Williams, I need to be honest with you about Faith's condition. She's stable for now, but we can't wait much longer for the transfusion. Her blood pressure is dropping, and without it. He didn't need to finish the sentence. How long do we have? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Maybe 2 hours, at most. After that, even with a transfusion, there could be permanent damage. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Is there any chance your sister might change her mind? I thought about my mother's cold words, about the way Cheryl had walked away without looking back, about how my father had nodded in agreement when they suggested Faith's death would simply be over. No, I said, tears streaming down my face. I don't think she will. Dr. Fletcher squeezed my shoulder gently. We're checking with other hospitals in the region to see if anyone has AB-negative blood available for transport. It's a long shot, but we're trying everything. After he left, I tried calling Darren again, but it went straight to voicemail. I knew he was driving as fast as he could, but would it be fast enough? I tried calling Cheryl's cell phone, desperate to reach her one more time, but she had already turned it off. In my desperation, I even called my parents. My father answered on the third ring. Dad, please, I sobbed into the phone. Please talk to Cheryl. Faith is dying. She's your granddaughter too. There was a long pause before he spoke. Bonnie, you need to understand that Cheryl has to protect her own child. Sometimes we have to make hard choices. Hard choices? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This isn't a choice between two children getting hurt. This is one child dying while another one could easily save her with no risk at all. There's always risk. My mother's voice came through the phone. She must have been listening on another extension. What if something goes wrong? What if Mia gets sick? Cheryl would never forgive herself. And what if Faith dies? Will you ever forgive yourselves? Another pause. Then my mother said something that chilled me to the bone. Bonnie, maybe this is just meant to be. Sometimes God has plans we don't understand. I hung up the phone, shaking with rage and disbelief. My own parents were essentially saying that God wanted my 8-year-old daughter to die. The people who had raised me, who had taught me about love and family and doing the right thing, were now suggesting that my child's death was part of some divine plan. I called my Aunt Edna, my father's sister, who lived about an hour away. She had always been the voice of reason in our family. Edna, I need your help, I said, explaining the situation through tears. Oh honey, I'm so sorry. Of course I'll help however I can. What's Faith's blood type? Ab negative. Oh no, I'm O positive. That won't work, will it? She paused. Wait, what about Cheryl and Mia? Didn't Mia have that rare blood type? That's the problem. Cheryl won't let Mia donate. She's afraid of infection or complications. Edna was quiet for a moment. Bonnie, that doesn't make sense. Blood donation is incredibly safe, especially for something like this. I donated blood dozens of times when I was younger. I know, but Cheryl won't listen. And Mom and Dad are supporting her decision. That's. Edna struggled for words. That's not right, Bonnie. That's not the family I know. Let me call your parents and talk to them. You can try, but I don't think it will help. After Edna hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, hoping it would ring with good news. Instead, it rang with Edna calling back, and I could hear the shock in her voice. Bonnie, I can't believe what I just heard. I've never been so ashamed of my own brother. The things your mother said. She took a shaky breath. I'm getting in my car right now. I can't do anything to help Faith medically, but you shouldn't be alone. While I waited for Edna to arrive, I walked to the hospital chapel. I'm not particularly religious, but I was desperate. I sat in the small, quiet room and prayed to whatever higher power might be listening. I prayed for Faith's life. I prayed for Darren and Marcus to arrive in time. And despite everything, I even prayed for my family to come to their senses. A hospital chaplain found me there about 20 minutes later. He was a kind, elderly man named Father Miguel who had clearly done this many times before. I heard about your daughter, he said softly. Dr. Fletcher asked me to check on you. How are you holding up? I told him everything. About the accident, about Cheryl's refusal, about my parents' cold response, about sitting alone while my daughter fought for her life. He listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making soft sounds of sympathy. I've been a hospital chaplain for 30 years, he said finally. I've seen families come together in crisis, and I've seen them fall apart. What I've learned is that emergencies don't change people, they reveal who people really are. What do you mean? Your sister's reaction, your parents' response, this isn't who they became today. This is who they've always been, but you're seeing it clearly for the first time because the stakes are so high. His words hit me like a physical blow because deep down, I knew he was right. I thought about all the times Cheryl had been selfish in smaller ways, all the times my parents had shown favoritism toward her, all the little moments I'd made excuses for because they were family. I keep thinking I should call them again, keep begging, I admitted. Father Miguel shook his head gently. You've done everything you can. Now you need to focus on being strong for Faith and trusting that help is coming. Edna arrived about an hour later, rushing into the waiting room and immediately wrapping me in the biggest hug I'd ever received. She brought coffee and sandwiches, insisting I needed to eat something, even though food was the last thing on my mind. Any word from Darren? She asked. He should be here soon. I just hope. I couldn't finish the sentence. He'll make it, Edna said firmly. And Faith is going to be okay. She's a fighter, just like her mom. We sat together in the waiting room, Edna holding my hand and telling me stories about Faith's last birthday party, trying to keep my mind occupied. Every few minutes, I would check my phone, hoping for an update from Darren. That's when I saw the missed calls. 3 from Darren, 2 from Marcus, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize. My phone had been on silent, and in my emotional state, I hadn't noticed the screen lighting up. I called Darren back immediately. Thank God, his voice was tight with stress. We're 15 minutes out. How's Faith? Hanging on. Darren, I'm so scared. I know, baby. We're going to make it. Marcus is ready to donate the moment we walk through those doors. Just hold on a little longer. I called Dr. Fletcher to let him know the donor was almost there. He sounded relieved but cautious. We'll get Mr. Williams tested and start the process immediately. Mrs. Williams, I want you to prepare yourself. Even with the transfusion, Faith has been without adequate blood volume for a while. There may be complications. When Darren and Marcus burst through the emergency room doors an hour and 45 minutes after I had first called for help, I had never been so happy to see anyone in my life. Marcus was immediately taken back for blood typing and donation while Darren held me as I broke down completely, telling him every horrible detail of what had happened. They just left, I sobbed into his shoulder. Cheryl walked away and took Mia with her. My parents told her to leave. They said once Faith was gone, it would be over. They wanted her to die, Darren. My own parents wanted our daughter to die. I felt Darren's body tense with rage as I spoke. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles working, and his hands were shaking with either anger or adrenaline, probably both. "What exactly did they say?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. I repeated every word I could remember, watching Darren's expression grow darker with each detail. When I got to my mother's comment about Faith's death being over, Darren actually took a step back, running his hands through his hair. "I can't believe these are the people who raised you," he said finally. "I can't believe I've been calling them family for 10 years. Edna, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Darren, I'm Eugene's sister, and I'm telling you right now, what they did today is unforgivable. That little girl in there is their granddaughter, and they were willing to let her die rather than ask Cheryl to face a minor inconvenience." Dr. Fletcher came out to update us about an hour later. Marcus had been a perfect match, and the donation had gone smoothly. They had started Faith's transfusion and were preparing for surgery to repair the head trauma. "The next few hours are critical," he explained. "The delay in getting the transfusion means we're not out of the woods yet, but her chances are much better now." As Faith was wheeled into surgery, I caught a glimpse of her small, pale face surrounded by medical equipment. She looked so tiny and fragile on that hospital bed. I squeezed Darren's hand as we watched them disappear through the surgical doors. But it was too late. Despite Marcus's successful donation and the immediate transfusion, the extended period without adequate blood flow had caused complications. The neurosurgeon, Dr. Bishop, explained that they needed to induce a medical coma to reduce brain swelling and give Faith's brain time to heal. "We've relieved the pressure and stopped the bleeding," Dr. Bishop told us after the 4-hour surgery. "But there was some swelling from the delayed transfusion. We're putting her in a medically induced coma to give her brain the best chance to recover. The next 72 hours will be critical." Those first 3 days were the longest of my life. Faith lay in the pediatric intensive care unit, connected to what seemed like dozens of machines monitoring every aspect of her condition. Darren and I took shifts sitting beside her bed, talking to her, reading her favorite stories, playing her favorite songs from my phone. The ICU staff was incredible. The nurses explained every machine, every medication, every procedure. They brought us blankets and coffee and somehow made us feel less alone in that sterile, beeping world. One nurse, Patricia, had a daughter Faith's age and would show us pictures during her breaks, reminding us that children are resilient and recover from things that would devastate adults. On the second day, my Aunt Edna brought us changes of clothes and toiletries from our house. She had gone by to pick up some of Faith's things too, her favorite stuffed animal, the photo from her last school picture, a small blanket she'd had since she was a baby. "Any word from your parents or Cheryl?" Edna asked quietly while Darren was down in the cafeteria getting food. "Nothing," I said, staring at Faith's pale face. "Not a call, not a text, nothing." Edna shook her head in disgust. "I called Eugene again yesterday. Told him his granddaughter was in a coma and asked if he wanted to come see her. You know what he said?" I wasn't sure I wanted to know, but I nodded. "He said, 'Edna, we've made our position clear. Cheryl did the right thing protecting her daughter, and we stand by that decision.' Then he hung up on me." I felt that familiar rage building again. She's in a coma because of their decision. She might never wake up because they valued Cheryl's imaginary concerns over Faith's actual life. "I know, honey. And I want you to know that not everyone in this family thinks they did the right thing. Your cousins are horrified. Uncle Mike wants to drive down here just to sit with you. The only people who think Cheryl and your parents did the right thing are Cheryl and your parents." On the third day, Darren was making more of those mysterious phone calls. I would see him in the hallway, speaking in hushed, serious tones, sometimes taking notes on a small pad he carried. When I asked about it, he would just say he was handling some things and change the subject. That evening, Dr. Bishop made the decision to start bringing Faith out of the induced coma. It was a gradual process that took several hours, and Darren and I never left her side. We held her hands, talked to her constantly, and watched the monitors for any sign that she was responding. The first sign was a small movement of her fingers around 2 a.m. on what would have been the fourth day. I was holding her hand when I felt the slight squeeze. "Darren," I whispered urgently. I think she squeezed my hand. We called Patricia, who came immediately to check. Within minutes, the room was full of medical staff, all watching for signs that Faith was waking up. Her eyes fluttered open around 4 a.m. She looked confused and scared, which Dr. Bishop said was completely normal. She couldn't talk yet because of the breathing tube, but she could follow simple commands, squeezing hands, moving her toes, blinking in response to questions. "Faith, sweetie, it's Mommy and Daddy," I whispered, leaning close to her face. You're in the hospital, but you're going to be okay. You were hurt, but you're getting better. Her eyes found mine, and I could see recognition there. She was still Faith. She was still my little girl. The breathing tube was removed the next day, and her first word was a hoarse, barely audible "Mommy." I've never heard anything more beautiful in my life. Recovery was slow. Faith had to relearn some basic motor functions, and her short-term memory was affected initially. She didn't remember the accident at all, which the doctor said was a blessing. She was confused about why she was in the hospital and kept asking for her grandparents and Aunt Cheryl. "Where's Grandma?" she asked on her second day awake. "Why didn't she come to see me?" Darren and I exchanged looks. We had talked about this moment but hadn't decided how to handle it. "Grandma and Grandpa are dealing with some things right now, sweetheart," I said carefully. "But Aunt Edna has been here, and Uncle Marcus saved your life by giving you some of his blood." Faith's eyes widened. "Uncle Marcus gave me blood? Like, his actual blood?" "Yes, sweetie. When you got hurt, you lost a lot of blood, and Uncle Marcus shared some of his with you to help you get better." "That's so cool," Faith said, and despite everything, Darren and I laughed. Only a kid would think getting a blood transfusion was cool. Over the next 2 weeks, Faith's physical recovery progressed steadily. The physical therapist worked with her on coordination and balance. The speech therapist helped with some minor word-finding issues she was having. The occupational therapist taught her strategies for dealing with the headaches and fatigue that were lingering effects of the brain injury. But the hardest part was watching her gradually realize that something had changed with our family. She kept asking about her grandparents and aunt, and our vague explanations weren't satisfying her curiosity. Finally, Edna sat down with Faith and explained it in terms an 8-year-old could understand. Sometimes adults make bad choices, and when they do, there are consequences. Your grandparents and Aunt Cheryl made some bad choices, and now they're dealing with the consequences. "What kind of bad choices?" Faith asked. "The kind that hurt other people," Edna said gently. "And when people hurt others, sometimes we have to stay away from them to protect ourselves." Faith seemed to accept this explanation, though she was clearly sad about it. She had always been close to her grandparents, and losing that relationship was another trauma on top of her physical injury. During Faith's recovery, Darren continued making his phone calls and taking mysterious meetings. He would disappear for hours at a time, always with that same serious expression, always carrying folders and documents I wasn't allowed to see. "What are you working on?" I asked him one evening as he prepared to leave for another meeting. "I'm making sure that what happened to Faith has consequences," he said grimly. "I'm making sure the people who were willing to let our daughter die face the results of that choice." I didn't press him for details. I was focused entirely on Faith's recovery, and if Darren wanted to handle whatever he was handling, I trusted him to do it right. 3 weeks after the accident, Faith was finally discharged from the hospital. She still had physical therapy twice a week and regular follow-up appointments, but she was home. She was alive. She was going to be okay. But those 3 weeks in the hospital had changed us all. I had seen my family's true nature in the worst possible way. Faith had survived something that could have killed her. And Darren had been planning something that I wouldn't fully understand until later. The day we brought Faith home, there was a news van parked across the street from our house. I didn't think much of it until Darren pointed it out. "They're not here for us," he said with a grim smile. "They're here for your parents." That's when I realized Darren's phone calls and meetings hadn't just been about gathering information. They had been about making sure that information reached the right people. Thankfully, Faith made a complete recovery, but those 3 weeks were hell on earth. Darren barely left the hospital, and when he did, it was to make phone calls. I didn't know what he was doing until later. During Faith's recovery, my family didn't visit once. They didn't call. They sent no flowers, no cards. It was as if we didn't exist. The only communication was a text from Cheryl saying she hoped Faith would be okay but that she still believed she'd made the right choice. When Faith finally came home, Darren sat me down for a conversation. "I want you to know what I've been doing while Faith was fighting for her life," he said quietly. "I've been making some calls and doing some research. I think you deserve to know exactly who your family really is." He pulled out a folder thick with documents. "Let's start with your parents. Do you remember how they always bragged about Dad's successful contracting business? How they paid cash for their house, their cars, everything?" I nodded. "My father, Eugene, had always been proud of building his business from nothing. It's all built on fraud, Bonnie. Tax evasion, using undocumented workers and paying them almost nothing, cutting corners on safety to save money. I have documentation going back 15 years. The IRS is very interested in this information. My mouth fell open. How did you find all this? Marcus works in corporate investigation, remember? When I told him what happened, he offered to look into your family. We figured if they could be so callous about faith, maybe they weren't the people you thought they were. He flipped to the next section. Your sister Cheryl. Remember how she and Tom bought that expensive house last year? The one she said they got such a great deal on? Yes, she said Tom's promotion made it possible. Darren's laugh was bitter. Tom never got promoted. Cheryl's been embezzling from the nonprofit she works for. She's been skimming donations meant for children's charities for over 2 years. The house, the car, Mia's private school, it's all paid for with stolen money. I felt sick. Oh my God. There's more. That medical concern she had about Mia? Complete nonsense. I had a pediatric hematologist review Mia's medical records. Yes, we have ways of getting those too. Mia is perfectly healthy and would have been an ideal donor. Cheryl lied because she was afraid that if Mia was in the hospital for any reason, someone might run additional tests and discover that Tom's not actually Mia's biological father. The room was spinning. What? Cheryl had an affair 3 years ago. DNA testing would prove Tom's not Mia's father, which would probably end their marriage and her comfortable lifestyle. She was willing to let Faith die to protect her secret. I started crying again, but this time it was from rage as much as grief. I've already contacted the appropriate authorities, Darren continued. The IRS raided your parents' business yesterday. They're facing tax evasion charges that could result in significant jail time and the loss of everything they own. Cheryl's been arrested for embezzlement. The nonprofit she stole from is pressing for the maximum sentence. What about Tom and Mia? I asked. They don't deserve to suffer for Cheryl's choices. Tom's a good man. When I approached him with the evidence about the affair and the embezzlement, he was devastated but grateful to finally understand why Cheryl had been acting so strangely. He's filing for divorce and seeking full custody of Mia. He wants nothing from Cheryl except for her to stay away from them. Darren showed me newspaper clippings from the local paper. Your father's business collapsed overnight. They're not only facing criminal charges, but also civil lawsuits from workers who were injured due to his safety violations. Your parents have lost their house and are likely going to prison. The nonprofit Cheryl stole from has recovered most of the money by seizing her assets. The house is gone, the car is gone, everything. She's looking at 3 to 5 years in prison, and when she gets out, she'll have nothing. I should have felt satisfied, but mostly I just felt empty. Why are you telling me all this? Because I want you to understand that these people, your parents and your sister, they showed you exactly who they are that day in the hospital. They were willing to watch your child die rather than face minor inconvenience. That level of selfishness doesn't come from nowhere. These people have been hurting others for years, and now they're facing the consequences. A few weeks later, I received a letter from Cheryl in jail. She begged for forgiveness, claiming she'd been scared and wasn't thinking clearly. She wanted me to ask Darren to somehow undo what he'd done. I wrote her back once. I told her that when Faith was lying in that hospital bed, Cheryl had shown me who she really was. When she chose her own comfort over my daughter's life, she made it clear that family meant nothing to her. I told her that Darren hadn't ruined her life, her own choices had done that. Darren had simply made sure she faced the consequences of those choices. My parents also tried to reach out, sending messages through relatives asking for forgiveness and help. They claimed they'd been supporting Cheryl because they thought it was the right thing to do. But I remembered my mother's words, "Don't worry. Once she's gone, it will be over." Those words told me everything I needed to know about what they really thought of Faith in me. I never responded to any of their attempts at contact. The hardest part wasn't cutting them out of my life, it was explaining to Faith why her grandparents and aunt weren't around anymore. We told her an age-appropriate version of the truth, that sometimes people make choices that hurt others, and when they do, there are consequences. Tom and Mia remained in our lives. Tom was horrified by Cheryl's actions and felt terrible that Mia hadn't been allowed to help Faith. He arranged for both girls to spend time together regularly, and Mia has become like a second daughter to Darren and me. She often tells Faith how sorry she is that she couldn't help her that day, even though we've explained it wasn't her fault. 6 months have passed since the accident. Faith has made a complete recovery and is back to her normal, energetic self. Cheryl was sentenced to 4 years in prison and will be eligible for parole in 2.5 years. My parents were each sentenced to 18 months for tax evasion and are facing bankruptcy due to the civil lawsuits. Tom married a wonderful woman named Lisa last month, and Mia seems happier than she's been in years. At the wedding, Mia asked Faith to be her maid of honor, and watching those two girls together, knowing that one was denied the chance to save the other's life by adult selfishness, was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. Some family members have criticized Darren's actions, saying he went too far and that family should forgive family. But I disagree. These people proved they were willing to let my child die rather than face minimal inconvenience. That's not family behavior, that's the behavior of strangers at best, enemies at worst. Darren didn't manufacture evidence or frame anyone. He simply made sure that people who had been hurting others for years finally faced consequences for their actions. The fact that they were my relatives doesn't change the fact that they chose greed, selfishness, and cruelty over doing the right thing. I've learned that blood relation doesn't make someone family. Family is the people who would do anything to help you when you need it most. Family is Marcus dropping everything to drive 2 hours to donate blood for his niece. Family is Tom choosing to remain in our lives despite his ex-wife's horrible actions. Family is little Mia asking constantly if there's anything she can do to help Faith, even months later. My parents and Cheryl are not family. They're just people who happen to share my DNA but not my values. Faith doesn't remember much from that day, which is a blessing. She knows she fell and got hurt, and she knows that Uncle Marcus helped save her life. She asks sometimes why we don't see Grandma and Grandpa anymore, and I tell her the truth in simple terms: they made choices that hurt our family, and sometimes when people hurt you badly enough, you have to protect yourself by staying away from them. I sleep peacefully at night knowing that Darren did what he felt was right. When I think about my mother's words, once she's gone, it will be over, I feel no guilt about the consequences they're all facing. They made their choices, and Darren simply made sure those choices had appropriate results. Some people might say revenge isn't the answer, but I don't see it as revenge. I see it as justice. These people had been causing harm for years, and they used my family emergency as an opportunity to cause even more harm. They didn't deserve protection from the consequences of their actions just because we shared blood. Faith is thriving, surrounded by people who truly love her. And the people who were willing to watch her die are facing the natural consequences of lives built on lies, greed, and selfishness. In the end, we discovered who our real family was, and we're all better off for it. Update. I wanted to add an update since several people have been asking about Faith's current condition and whether there have been any further developments. Faith is doing wonderfully. She's back in school, excelling in all her subjects, and has taken up rock climbing at an indoor gym, with proper safety equipment, of course. She says she wants to conquer her fear of falling. Her doctor says she's made a complete recovery with no lasting effects from the head trauma. As for legal updates, Cheryl was denied early parole last month. Apparently, her behavior in prison hasn't been exemplary, and she was caught trying to manipulate other inmates' family members to send her money. My parents are scheduled to be released next month, but they'll be essentially homeless and penniless. Tom's new wife Lisa has officially adopted Mia, and they asked Faith to be present for the ceremony. It was beautiful watching these two little girls who've become true sisters despite the circumstances. I received one more letter from Cheryl a few weeks ago. This time, instead of begging for forgiveness, she was angry. She blamed Darren and me for destroying her life and claimed that Faith would have been fine without the transfusion. It only confirmed that she still doesn't understand the gravity of what she did. I didn't respond to that letter either. Some people never learn, and I've made peace with the fact that Cheryl is one of them. Darren and I are stronger than ever, and we're planning to renew our vows on the anniversary of the day Marcus saved Faith's life. Sometimes the worst moments in life show you what really matters, and for us, that's each other and the people who truly have our backs when everything falls apart.